Naomi Carter looked like any other quiet employee at St. Francis Medical Center. She worked on the third floor, handling patient billing and insurance files with a calm efficiency that made her blend into the background. To her coworkers, she was the woman who always brought lunch from home, reheating food in glass containers inside the old microwave in the nurse's lounge. They laughed when she joked that she was the three-outfit woman, rotating the same few suits to look like a full wardrobe. Nobody in that building knew she was the only daughter of Victor Carter, the man who built Carter Development into a real estate empire that owned a quarter of Houston's skyline. At 29, Naomi had lived in disguise for 3 years, hiding behind simplicity to test whether the man she loved could see beyond wealth. His name was Adrian Wells, a tall and ambitious medical student at Baylor College of Medicine. The first time Naomi met him, she had been volunteering at a community health outreach. She nearly dropped a stack of folders, but Adrian caught them effortlessly, flashing the kind of smile that felt like sunlight after a storm. "Careful," he said warmly, handing them back. That moment became the start of something she thought was destiny. Within weeks, they were inseparable: late-night study sessions, casual meals in cheap diners, and long drives across Houston. Naomi believed she had found her forever. After 1 month, Naomi moved into a small apartment near campus, so she could drive Adrian to class every morning. By the 3rd month, she began transferring him $5,000 every term to help with tuition. After a year, she was covering nearly all their living expenses. Adrian never asked, but he never refused either. Naomi never thought twice about it. If love is real, it shouldn't depend on money, she told herself often. She wanted Adrian to love Naomi, the ordinary woman, not Miss Carter, the heiress with a trust fund big enough to buy entire city blocks. She built a modest life around a small salary, living in a 1-bedroom apartment where the ceiling fan rattled every night and the fridge hummed like it was decades old. But every Friday night, after leaving the hospital, Naomi would drive into the underground garage of the Warwick Hotel. There, she changed out of her faded work clothes into a silk dress and switched her battered Toyota for a sleek Range Rover parked on a private lease. From there, she drove to her family's lake estate, a mansion with a kitchen larger than her apartment and a wine cellar Adrian never knew existed. Her father, Victor, knew about Adrian from the beginning, and he never approved. "Sweetheart, how long will you live this double life?" he asked one evening as Naomi entered his office, her hair still smelling faintly of the parking garage. She sat across from him, folding her hands. "Until I know for sure," she replied softly. Victor sighed, pouring her a glass of Bordeaux. "Real love doesn't hide, Naomi. If he's the right one, you won't need to pretend for 3 years." Naomi lowered her gaze to the delicate ring on her finger, a small diamond Adrian had given her in a Mexican diner. She once thought the ring was a symbol of sacrifice. But Naomi didn't know that the same week Adrian bought it, he had also purchased an expensive watch, lying to her that it was a knockoff from eBay. The truth was, she had been living 2 lives. One as an ordinary woman counting every penny, and another as a hidden heiress who could buy entire neighborhoods if she wanted to. 3 years passed, 6 academic terms, and over $30,000 transferred into Adrian's tuition and expenses. She thought she was investing in their future, until one day, at his graduation party, Adrian told the security guard, "She's not part of my family. Escort her out." Naomi's mornings began at 5:15 a.m. Not because she enjoyed early rising, but because Adrian insisted she walk 30 minutes to the hospital instead of driving, just to save gas. He would kiss her forehead and murmur, "You're the most frugal woman I know. With you, I can get through anything." She would smile, slip a pre-written check into his anatomy book, and add a note, "Don't forget breakfast." Adrian never asked how Naomi always managed the money. He never noticed that the lunch bag she carried every day once appeared on the cover of a fashion magazine, its logo carefully removed. Their apartment was old and worn, with peeling paint and creaking wooden floors. Yet every Friday night after her hospital shift, Naomi transformed herself. In the restroom, she tied her hair neatly, applied soft pink lipstick, and ordered an Uber to the Warwick Hotel's basement garage. There, her luxury SUV and an evening gown awaited. By nightfall, she was Miss Carter again, driving west towards Springwood Lakeside, a gated community where housekeepers greeted her with martinis and investment reports. On the balcony, she often stared at the glittering city skyline, whispering to herself, "Would Adrian hold me out of love or out of awe?" For 3 years, Naomi convinced herself that if she kept her secret long enough, Adrian would prove he loved her truly, without wealth as a factor. She had even purchased a penthouse near the hospital, keeping its keys in her desk drawer for months, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. Once, when Adrian teased, "You've never shown me your place," Naomi smiled and promised, "After graduation, it'll be a surprise." She wasn't lying. She was just hiding the truth, clinging to the hope that love could bloom in a tiny kitchen just as much as in a marble mansion. As Adrian's graduation approached, he spoke constantly of their future: cars, trips to Italy, a grand beach wedding. "We'll figure out the money, right?" he asked confidently, squeezing Naomi's hand. She looked at him silently, remembering the countless checks, the endless nights of ramen, and the $32,000 she had already given. Each week, she still shopped for his vitamins, cleaned out the fridge, and managed their rent. She once thought it was love. But then things began to shift. Adrian's old watch was suddenly replaced with a new luxury brand, and his Thursday study nights left his textbooks untouched. Something inside Naomi stirred suspicion. Naomi didn't question him openly at first. Instead, she quietly slipped a small GPS tracker into the car key she had once gifted him. A week later, the tracker confirmed her worst fears. Adrian wasn't going to study groups on Thursday nights. He was driving to a luxury apartment complex in River Oaks. For 2 nights straight, the signal led to the same destination. Naomi sat alone in her creaking apartment, staring at the glowing red dot on her phone screen. Her stomach twisted as she whispered, "Who's waiting for you there? Adrian?" She wanted to confront him, but fear and strategy held her back. That evening, Naomi prepared Adrian's favorite meal, fettuccine with creamy mushroom sauce and a fresh salad. She lit candles and set the table, glancing at the clock as it ticked past 9. At 9:47, her phone buzzed with a text: "Studying cardiophysiology with the group. Heading back soon." At 10:36, the door opened. Adrian entered, looking tired but carrying a faint, unfamiliar perfume on his collar. Naomi's heart sank. She forced a smile. "You're late. Dinner's still warm." He kissed her hair lightly. "Lab issues, nothing serious. You didn't have to wait up." Naomi just nodded, her voice steady. "Your favorite dish is waiting." He ignored the food and went straight to the shower. Naomi's eyes followed him down the hall. She reached for her phone, scrolling to Talia, her closest friend who worked in Baylor's HR department. Her finger hovered over the call button, but she didn't press it. Instead, she opened her photo gallery and zoomed in on a picture of Adrian from the spring festival weeks earlier. On his wrist gleamed a new watch, Longines Master Collection. Retail price, almost $2,000. Naomi's lips trembled. "Knock off from eBay." "Huh," she whispered bitterly. That night, she made up her mind. She would stop being the naive fiancé. She would start gathering evidence. The first proof came sooner than expected. Adrian's jacket lay on the couch, and Naomi, with trembling fingers, slipped her hand into the pocket. Out came a receipt. Azure Seafood Restaurant, one of the most expensive dining spots in the Heights. Dinner for two, $184. The date matched one of his study nights. Naomi's throat tightened. She said nothing when Adrian returned, but her eyes began to linger longer on his phone, which he now always kept face down. One evening, she heard him speaking from the bathroom. "Yeah, Saturday works. Same spot. Don't text anything weird." She's getting suspicious. When he emerged, Naomi asked casually, "Who was that?" Adrian didn't even blink. "The dean. He wants to take me fishing, but I probably won't go." Naomi smiled, pretending to believe. The next morning, after he left, she reached for his old phone. The one he had claimed was wiped after upgrading. She powered it on. The archive still held fragments of old conversations. Her chest tightened as she read the most recent text from saved contact. I still haven't forgotten that night at Riverstone. Bring the ring next time. I love how it feels. Naomi froze, the phone shaking in her hands. The ring, she whispered. What ring? Her mind raced. Adrian had never worn any ring except the small engagement band she gave him. Riverstone, she recognized the name. It was the same luxury apartment complex where his car kept appearing on the GPS tracker. She pressed the phone to her chest and whispered, "You've been performing for me this whole time." That week, she discovered another receipt in his briefcase. White gold earrings, $1,250 from Livia and Company. He had claimed he was stuck in traffic on I-610 that night. Naomi checked her own Uber record for that evening. Only 18 minutes on the same route. No rain, no jam. The lies stacked higher than she could bear. The cracks widened at the med school gala. Naomi arrived late because of extra paperwork at the hospital. As she entered the glittering ballroom, she spotted Adrian surrounded by laughing classmates. One asked loudly, "So, who'd you bring tonight?" Still with the frugal roommate. Adrian smirked and shrugged. "Yeah, my long-term roommate. Easier to call her that." The group erupted in laughter. Naomi's legs felt like lead as she stepped closer. Adrian turned, quickly masking his slip. "Naomi, I was just telling them how you pack my breakfast every morning." Naomi forced a smile, nodded, and quietly excused herself. That night, Naomi made a decision. No tears, no begging, no rage. Only strategy. She began reaching out. Her first call was to a woman Adrian once described as controlling and jealous, his ex, Lauren Pierce. Back then, he had painted her as unreasonable, the kind who would call the hospital over a simple message. Naomi once pitied him. Now, she knew there had to be more to the story. Lauren agreed to meet at a quiet cafe in Montrose. When Naomi arrived, Lauren's eyes studied her cautiously. "You're the fiancé," she said softly. "Not anymore," Naomi whispered, setting down her coffee. "But I need the truth." Lauren let out a humorless laugh. "Let me guess, he told you he was struggling financially? That he just needed someone who believed in him?" Naomi nodded slowly. "I gave him almost $33,000. Lauren raised her brows, then pulled out her phone. With a few swipes, she showed Naomi a photo, an old Excel sheet. "I found this on his laptop years ago. He was tracking us like projects." Naomi leaned closer. Columns listed names, amounts, durations, and outcomes. Emily, Nora, Lauren. Naomi's breath caught. Under each name were totals, notes, even timelines of when to end relationships. Naomi's body went cold. Lauren whispered, "He had another Venmo account under a fake name. Women kept sending money. I even found a receipt for a wedding ring. Wasn't for me, and clearly not for you either." Naomi clenched her fists. "Do you know who else?" Lauren shook her head. "I know Clarissa, a nurse. He told people she destroyed a relationship, but I'm sure he made that up too." That night, Naomi returned home and waited until Adrian was asleep. Quietly, she took the spare key he hid under a vitamin jar and unlocked his private filing cabinet. Inside was no paperwork, only a slim black leather notebook. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The first page of the notebook felt like a punch to Naomi's chest. It wasn't a journal. It was a ledger. Page 1 listed Emily, dental assistant, $18, $400. Relationship ended after 9 months. Transition to Lauren. Naomi's hands shook as she turned to the next page. Lauren, clinic coordinator, $25, $200, considered stable, long-term potential. Terminated early. Her heart hammered as she reached the third entry. Naomi, hospital administrator, $32, $100, high support potential. No suspicion. Currently engaged. Viewed as potential residency sponsor. Maintained through graduation. She closed her eyes, fighting the urge to scream. Flipping to the final entry, her blood went cold. Bree, daughter of board physician, unstable personal income but strong family influence. Owns condo at Riverstone. Currently testing intimacy. Evaluation. Viable replacement for Naomi if residency path succeeds. Naomi pressed the notebook shut, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She wasn't his partner, wasn't his love. She was an investment. And now, he was preparing to liquidate her like a stock he no longer needed. Naomi didn't collapse into tears. She didn't yell. Instead, she stood in the silence of that small apartment, feeling a strange, icy clarity. For 3 years, she had clung to hope. But now she had the truth in her hands, in black ink. She whispered to herself, "I wasn't the woman. I was the project." The next morning, she texted Lauren, "We're not victims. We're evidence." She opened her laptop and began her own spreadsheet. Every wire transfer, every receipt, every screenshot. She wasn't going to police. She wanted something sharper, something permanent. Her plan began to spread quietly. Naomi sent a cautious email to Clarissa, the nurse Lauren had mentioned. Within hours, Clarissa replied with only 3 words, "It's time." Naomi's lips curled into the faintest smile. The women weren't alone. Adrian had left behind a trail, and each woman carried a piece of the puzzle. Naomi began to see the picture forming. Not a love story, but a pattern of exploitation. She didn't want vengeance that faded. She wanted justice that would mark him forever. When Adrian's graduation invitation arrived, Dr. Adrian Wells, Hyatt Regency Grand Ballroom, Houston, Naomi knew the final stage was close. The invitation looked ordinary, but she didn't need to ask who had truly funded it. 3 separate event companies were listed on the design, catering, and lighting contracts. All of them quietly owned by Carter Holdings. Adrian thought his colleagues had arranged a small celebration. Naomi had arranged everything. He had no idea he was walking into a stage set by the very woman he underestimated. Victor Carter noticed her preparations. "Naomi," he said one evening, watching her calmly draft emails. "What are you planning?" She looked up, her expression unreadable. "Not revenge, Dad. A lesson." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Just don't let his betrayal turn you bitter." Naomi smiled faintly. "I won't, but I will make sure he never forgets." The night of the graduation gala, Naomi chose her armor carefully. A black satin gown with a square neckline, minimal jewelry, her hair swept into a high bun. She wore the small engagement ring, Adrian's so-called sacrifice, one last time. As she arrived at the Hyatt ballroom, the air shimmered with golden light, jazz music, and murmurs of wealthy families. Adrian stood in the center, tuxedo sharp, champagne flute in hand. His grin was wide until his eyes found Naomi at the doorway. For a moment, his smile faltered. Then he forced it back. Naomi moved through the ballroom with quiet poise. She noticed at once there was no seat for her near the stage. Approaching an event staffer, she asked softly, "Could you check again? I'm the one who signed the rental contract for this ballroom." The man blinked nervously, scanning the list. "I'm sorry, your name isn't listed in the main seating." Naomi gave him a calm nod. "Then double-check." As he rushed off, she turned to Adrian's group of friends. Laughter died as she approached. Margaret Wells, Adrian's mother, turned sharply. Her blue dress sparkled under the chandeliers, her pearls catching the light. "Oh, Naomi," she said coolly, her voice edged with disdain. "I thought you had a night shift at the hospital." Naomi's lips curved into a thin smile. "I was supposed to, but for an evening this important, I thought I'd attend the closing act myself." Margaret's eyes narrowed, suspicion and irritation flashing across her face. Adrian stepped forward quickly, his jaw tight. "You made it," he said stiffly. "I was going to call after the ceremony." Naomi's eyes locked on his. "To do what?" "Thank me for being left off the guest list." Before he could answer, Margaret cut in sharply. "You're disrupting the evening. Shall I ask security to escort you out?" Naomi glanced at Adrian, then at the elegant woman in red standing beside him, her hand resting too comfortably on his arm. Naomi inhaled slowly. "Fine," she said, "but before I leave, I have a gift." Naomi walked to the main table, where Adrian's champagne glass gleamed under the lights. Without a word, she slid the engagement ring off her finger and let it drop into the glass. The diamond hit the bottom with a sharp clink that echoed louder in her mind than the music around her. Gasps rippled through the tables. Naomi straightened her shoulders and spoke clearly, her voice steady. Congratulations, Dr. Adrian Wells. May you find many new investors. Let's hope they don't demand refunds. For a moment, the ballroom fell silent. Margaret's lips parted, but no words came. Adrian's face drained of color, his polished grin cracking into a scowl. Naomi didn't wait to see the reactions. She turned and walked toward the double doors. Each step felt like she was shedding 3 years of her life, leaving behind the weight of deception. By the time she reached the exit, she wasn't the invisible fiancé anymore. She was Naomi Carter again, no longer someone's shadow. She didn't return to her small midtown apartment that night. Instead, she drove straight to Carter Pearl Tower, her family's skyscraper in downtown Houston. Taking the private elevator to the 41st floor, she entered the penthouse she had kept hidden for 3 years. The doorman greeted her with a respectful bow. "Welcome back, Miss Carter. It's been a while." Naomi smiled faintly. "I'll be staying more often now. Please arrange for cleaning in the morning." The vast apartment opened before her, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the glittering skyline. She stood in the quiet, staring at the city lights like they were a control panel of fate. Picking up the phone, she dialed her father. Victor's voice came steady and deep. "Naomi," she exhaled. "It's me. I'm ready." A pause stretched, heavy with unspoken meaning. Then he asked, "Are you ready to be a Carter again?" Naomi's voice was calm but resolute, more ready than ever. The following morning, Naomi didn't dress in her plain office attire. Instead, she put on a slate gray suit, her hair tied neatly, a designer bag hanging lightly on her shoulder. When she entered St. Francis Medical Center, staff members blinked in surprise. She didn't stop on the 3rd floor. Instead, she walked straight into the executive boardroom where Dr. Ronald Kessler, the residency program director, waited. "Good morning, Miss Carter," he said politely. "We met at the Houston Medical Foundation Gala, didn't we?" Naomi nodded. "We did. Today, I'm here about one of your candidates, Adrian Wells." Dr. Kessler frowned slightly. "What about him?" Naomi placed a thick folder on the desk. Inside were wire transfer receipts, photos of Lauren's spreadsheet, screenshots from Clarissa, restaurant bills, and finally, the black leather notebook filled with Adrian's cold calculations. "I'm not here for personal revenge," Naomi said firmly. "I'm here to protect the reputation of this hospital." Adrian Wells didn't just make mistakes. He engineered a system. He targeted women, tracked their finances, and exploited them methodically. Dr. Kessler flipped through the pages slowly, his face tightening with every line he read. He looked up after several minutes, the weight of the evidence clear in his expression. "These are serious accusations," he said gravely. "If even half of this is true, his residency prospects are finished." Naomi leaned back in her chair, her voice steady. "They're not accusations. They're proof." For a moment, silence filled the boardroom. Then Dr. Kessler nodded slowly. "You've done the right thing bringing this forward. The board will handle it from here." Naomi gave a small, calm smile. "That's all I needed." She rose to her feet, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. As she left, she felt lighter, as though she had finally laid down a burden she had carried too long. Outside the boardroom, Naomi pulled out her phone. A message from Lauren blinked across the screen. "How did it go?" Naomi typed back, "The board knows. His career ends before it begins." A reply came seconds later. "Good. We're not just his exes. We're his legacy." Naomi stared at those words, her lips curving into a wry smile. For once, she felt the truth. Adrian hadn't broken her. He had forged her into steel. That evening, Naomi sat on her penthouse balcony overlooking Houston's skyline. The city hummed with life below, but up here, she felt untouchable. Her father joined her, setting down 2 glasses of wine. "You've changed," he said quietly. Naomi met his gaze. "No, Dad. I've remembered who I am." They clinked glasses, the sound sharp against the night air. Naomi whispered to herself, "He thought I was just an investment, but I am the empire he'll never own." News spread faster than Naomi expected. Within a week, Adrian's name appeared in hushed whispers across the residency committee. Some staff called it financial misconduct. Others simply said, "He's finished." Naomi never once interfered after handing over the folder. She didn't need to. The evidence spoke louder than she ever could. Adrian tried calling her, but Naomi never picked up. His texts went unanswered in one. He wrote, "You've misunderstood. Let me explain." Naomi only looked at it once before deleting the thread. There was nothing left to explain. At the hospital cafeteria, whispers followed her now, too. She caught fragments. "Did you hear about Wells? Some heiress was involved. No wonder she carried herself differently lately." Naomi ignored them. She wasn't there for gossip. She was there to finish what she had started. When Talia cornered her one afternoon, eyes wide with shock, Naomi simply said, "I learned the truth, and now he's facing it." Talia hesitated, then whispered, "Good. You deserve so much better, Naomi." For the first time in months, Naomi believed it. Adrian showed up at her midtown apartment one night, pounding on the door. Naomi watched through the peephole, her expression unreadable. "Naomi, open up. We can work this out. I love you." His voice cracked with desperation. But Naomi only shook her head silently. She had moved out days ago, leaving behind nothing but the echo of her old life. She turned away from the door, her heels clicking across the penthouse floor as she whispered, "You love my support, not me." A week later, Margaret Wells herself appeared at the Carter office. She was icy, composed, her pearl necklace gleaming under the reception lights. Victor received her in his office, but Naomi insisted on being present. Margaret's eyes narrowed as she sat across the polished oak desk. "Your daughter has ruined my son's future," she said coldly. Naomi leaned forward. "No, Mrs. Wells. Your son ruined his own future. I just made sure no one else suffered for it." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. She stood without another word, her heels striking the floor like a gavel. Victor turned to Naomi after Margaret left. "You handled that with grace," he said. Naomi exhaled, her shoulders relaxing. "For years, I thought hiding was strength. Now I know strength is standing in the light." Victor's eyes softened. "And I'm proud of you." For the first time in a long while, Naomi felt her father's approval not as a demand, but as a gift freely given. Life at St. Francis slowly returned to normal. Naomi resumed her work, though whispers still lingered. One afternoon, a young nurse stopped her in the hallway. "Miss Carter? Naomi, thank you," she said nervously. "I was almost drawn in by Adrian, too. If you hadn't exposed him, who knows?" Naomi smiled gently. "Protect yourself. And remember, you're worth more than someone else's schemes." The nurse nodded, her eyes bright with relief. Adrian's downfall was swift. His residency offer was withdrawn. Rumors spread among hospitals across Texas, each more damning than the last. Naomi didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. Instead, she sat quietly in her penthouse one evening, sipping tea as the news scrolled across her phone. Dr. Adrian Wells under investigation for financial exploitation. She closed the screen and whispered, "That chapter is closed." Lauren called her days later. "He's been trying to reach out to me too," she said with a scoff. "I blocked him." Naomi chuckled softly. "He's like a drowning man clutching at anyone nearby." Lauren hesitated, then added, "You know, Naomi, we should be proud. We stopped him." Naomi's voice softened. "We did. And maybe that's the only good thing to come out of this. No one else will fall for him." Clarissa joined them for coffee one weekend. The three women sat together, not as victims, but as survivors. "He thought we were his investments," Clarissa said bitterly. Naomi lifted her cup. "But we're not his portfolio. We're the ones who closed his account." They laughed, a sound tinged with relief and strength. For Naomi, it was the first time in years she felt like she wasn't alone. On a quiet evening, Naomi stood once more on her balcony, the Houston skyline stretching endlessly before her. She thought of the 3 years she had given, the money, the love, the patience. None of it wasted, because it had brought her here, stronger than ever. She whispered into the night air, "I thought I was testing him, but life was testing me." And for the first time, she felt she had passed. Adrian's attempts to repair his reputation only made things worse. He tried to charm his professors, tried to convince classmates that Naomi had lied out of jealousy. But the evidence was too heavy, too detailed, too undeniable. "People don't forge notebooks," one professor muttered after seeing the black leather ledger. Adrian's polished smile lost its power. He was no longer seen as a promising doctor, but as a cautionary tale. Naomi heard about his decline through whispers and headlines, but she didn't indulge in following every detail. Instead, she focused on rebuilding her own life. She rejoined Carter Development, this time not as the quiet daughter, but as an executive with her own voice. At her first board meeting, the men around the table exchanged glances of surprise at her confidence. "I'll be overseeing community health projects," she announced firmly. "If we build towers, we must also build trust." Victor leaned back in his chair, pride shining in his eyes. At the hospital, Naomi's colleagues adjusted slowly to the truth about her identity. Some were awkward, unsure how to treat her. Others were supportive. Talia teased her one afternoon. "So, Miss Secret Heiress, does this mean you're buying us a new microwave for the lounge?" Naomi laughed for the first time in months. "Yes, consider it my peace offering." The small joke melted the tension, and soon Naomi felt like she belonged again. Not because she was hiding, but because she was honest. Weeks passed, and Naomi began to notice something new within herself. She no longer measured her worth through Adrian's eyes or through anyone else's approval. She woke up each morning with a calm certainty. She was enough. One evening, she stood before the mirror, no silk gown, no disguise, just Naomi in her simple pajamas. She smiled at her reflection and whispered, "I'm finally free." Lauren called one night, her voice softer than usual. "You know, Naomi, I kept asking myself why we stayed with him so long. And I think I finally get it. He was good at making us feel like we were saving him. But we never needed to save him. We needed to save ourselves." Naomi nodded, even though Lauren couldn't see her. "And we did," Naomi said quietly. "We chose ourselves in the end." Clarissa later added, during one of their coffee meetings, "He thought he could break us into pieces. Instead, he forced us to find each other." Naomi smiled at that. Funny how betrayal can build unexpected bridges. The three women clinked their cups together. It wasn't victory they celebrated. It was survival, strength, and the bond of women who refused to be silent anymore. Adrian eventually left Houston, his name tainted, his prospects shattered. Naomi didn't know where he went, and she didn't care. One morning, she passed by Baylor College and saw a new group of medical students laughing together, hopeful about the future. She whispered under her breath, "Let them do better than you ever did, Adrian." Then she walked on, her head high. Naomi's life slowly blossomed in ways she hadn't expected. She took on new projects, mentored young women at the hospital, and even began speaking at community events about financial independence. People admired her not as the heiress of Carter Development, but as Naomi Carter, the woman who had walked through fire and emerged stronger. Each story she told carried a simple message: don't let anyone measure your worth in numbers. You are more than that. Victor watched her from afar with quiet pride. One evening, he told her, "You remind me of your mother. She had the same strength, the same fire in her eyes." Naomi felt her chest tighten with emotion. "I just wish she could see me now." Victor placed a gentle hand on hers. "She does, and she's proud." The words sank deep, filling spaces Naomi hadn't realized were empty. On a warm Houston night, Naomi returned to her balcony, the skyline glittering before her. The wind lifted her hair as she closed her eyes. She thought of the girl who once rotated 3 outfits to hide her wealth, the woman who gave $32,000 for love, the fiancé who was discarded like a stranger. That girl was gone. What remained was a woman who understood her own value. She whispered into the city air, "I am Naomi Carter. I am not an investment. I am the empire." And with that, her story was no longer one of loss, but of power reclaimed.